Okay. I think we are live. So good afternoon, everybody. And welcome to Carly informed me we're on episode 10
I believe so. I think it's 10 already. That's super exciting.
of Living in the Texas Hill Country. It feels like we've been doing this for 2.5 months now, which is kind of crazy to be honest.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like it for sure.
No, which is great. That's absolutely great. Um, but yeah, so thanks for joining us all. I wanted to say this morning. I keep wanting to say this morning. It is the
Yes,
afternoon.
this
Um,
afternoon.
Good afternoon, everybody. Again, thank you for joining us. We're going to talk about CWD, or also known as chronic wasting disease today. That is one of those topics that unfortunately here in Texas has become I hate to say sort of the norm, but has become the norm. And with deer season right around the corner, which I'm super excited about. I'm always ready for deer season for a multitude of reasons because it means one, it's not so stinking hot, but two, I actually get to break out like my sweaters and my like nice
Yes.
comfy clothes. Um, but this morning, oh my gosh, this afternoon, I need to put a post-it note on my computer that just says afternoon. So joining us this afternoon is Cody. So Cody is a wildlife biologist with Texas Parks and Wildlife, and he is out of, you said you are over Blanco County and Kimball County?
Kendall County.
Kendall County. Oh,
Yeah.
one letter
Close
off.
enough.
Just
Yeah.
one letter off. Um, but I guess do you want to just give us a little bit of your background, where you're from, how long you've been a TPWD biologist, and then we'll get things.
Sure. Of course. Yeah. So thanks for having me. Like you said, my name's Cody Stricker. It's known as a district wildlife biologist for Texas Parks and Wildlife, covering Kendall and Blanco counties in the Hill Country. I've been at this position for just at 2 years now. So 2 years will be entering my third hunting season on the job. I'm really fortunate, even though I'm kind of early on in my career here, I really fortunate to have kind of landed back home. I grew up in the Berkheim area, so that's, on Highway 46 between Bernie and Bulverde. A small place, but growing fast. Grew up on some family land there, so I was really fortunate to spend a lot of time outdoors, exploring, having kind of fostering that curiosity of all things, wild lands and wild places, and kind of just wanting to learn more about it and to figure out how to steward it. And once I found out that, hey, you can make a career out of you know trying to study these things more and helping landowners do that, I knew that's just what needed to do. So just real quick, I did my undergrad at Texas A&M in wildlife and fisheries sciences. Graduated a couple years back, and then since then did a few seasonal positions. So one being as the intern at summer intern at the Shield Ranch over in Travis County. Um,
Oh,
a really cool place. Oh, I guess you're familiar
I
with
am
it there.
very familiar with the Shield Ranch.
Great
Sidetrack.
stuff.
So yes, so my husband and I went to graduate school with Grant.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Yes. So
yeah.
wait, I feel like maybe we've met. Anyway, there's
Maybe
a
so.
chance.
Yeah, it's a small
Anyway,
world in
sorry. It
wildlife.
is a very
Small world for
small
sure.
world. Very
Yeah.
small world.
But no, I was really fortunate to get to work out there for the summer with Grant as my main supervisor, pretty much, and getting to work closely with him. But then after that summer, I did a position as a seasonal chronic wasting disease technician with Texas Parks and Wildlife. So that year, that was the fall of the 2022, and so I helped at one of our CWD zones, staffing one of the zones, helping collect samples from hunter harvested deer in the Gillespie County zone. So I was at the Harper's check station. So I spent quite a few hours up there sitting in Harper waiting for hunters to bring their deer in. So um, but yeah, and then after that, I was, like I said, I was fortunate enough to be able to land this role, and that's where I've been the past 2 years. So,
Well, hey, it is not a bad area at all to get to work and play without a
mhm,
doubt.
for
Um,
sure.
but I guess we'll start like very, very basic. Most
Mhm.
people are probably familiar, unfortunately,
Mhm.
probably have heard of what CWD is. But for those who haven't, can you just give us like a real quick like breakdown of like what it is, how does it affect deer? Just get a CWD 101.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, so CWD, it's what's known as it's a transmissible spongiform encephalopathy, which is a very big term that doesn't always help when you're trying to explain the CWD 101. But essentially, it's in that same group of family of diseases as like mad cow or scrapie and sheep. Those sort of things. It's not the same. I think there's a lot of folks that think maybe that it's one and the same and it just affects different species, but it's its own kind of its own beast. Essentially, though, what it is that it's not a bacteria, it's not an infection, it's nothing like that. It's caused by a misfolded prion, and so I there was a lot of learning. When I was a technician, I was trying to wrap my head around like what is all this and how does it affect us
I
and
I still can't wrap my head around it. If you really
Mhm.
think about it, it's like it's crazy.
Yeah,
It's
it
kind of
is.
a crazy
It's
disease.
hard. It really is hard to wrap our heads around to like really try and visualize it because so the best way I've kind of explained it to myself, I think, when you go back to kind of those basic biology classes of, the cell and the cell structure and the cell membrane. Essentially, there's that cell membrane set up around each cell in our bodies or in a deer body, and essentially there's cell membrane that we have to get nutrients and different things through. And so the way that our biology is set up to do that is there's proteins that carry those to and from and within the cell and out of the cell. And so the way that works is that these proteins basically, I call it kind of a lock. I mean, it's called like a lock and key structure. It's basically the proteins like your lock, and then the on the cell membrane itself, there's a protein receptor the receptor is the lock, and then the protein's the key, and they kind of are made to match up to one another, so that they can transmit or move those resources between them, different energy, but also just nutrients, things like that, different elements that they need. I know, like I think zinc and copper is one of those things that get transmitted a lot. But essentially, a prion is a type of protein, and essentially when it becomes an infected prion, it just is misfolded, so that picture that key now doesn't fit in your lock anymore. And so over time, when that key doesn't fit in your lock, you're not getting inside your house, and so the cells aren't getting the nutrients they need, and it just slowly over time just continues to kind of degrade the amount of, you lose cells, you lose cellular function in your body, and over time you just lose more and more and more until basically you can't operate. And so that's why it's considered chronic wasting disease, because you just slowly waste away, kind of from the inside out. So I don't know if that helps any
Oh
of
no,
that.
that's actually I think that's a really good way of explaining CWD because it's really not. It's just and it's just weird because you can catch it. It is a
Mm,
transmissible disease.
mhm,
Um, but it's just one of those things where again, like you said, it's not a bacteria, it's not a virus, it's not any sort of like fungal or pest. Like it is something
mm.
that our body does and it goes wrong. Just
Yeah,
say our
it's just
body,
yeah,
deer,
yeah.
spongiforms in general.
Mhm,
It just because I think people can get it. I think it's Crookfeldt Jacobs. I don't know. It's named
mhm.
after a person.
Yeah,
It's a
yeah.
person's
Yeah.
name, but yeah,
Mhm,
we get a version of it as well. But thus far has not been shown to actually, the deer version has not been shown to transmit over to people. We will say that. I know there's,
Yeah.
I think a year or so ago, there's
Mhm.
something that popped up about people getting it from
Mhm.
deer, but it's complex, it's convoluted. We're not going to talk about that today. We don't have
Yeah.
any doctors. We are
Mhm.
biologists here.
Yeah, exactly.
Um,
Exactly. But yeah,
okay.
no, that's a good point. Yeah, that to date, there's never been a case of humans contracting CWD. We don't know that we can, but we always just recommend that as within any diseased animal, you probably wouldn't want to eat it. If you knew that animal had it.
Yes.
You don't want to give it the opportunity to make a jump. If that crazy fluke event happens where it is possible. But I would like to add too that so far to date, there's no treatment for CWD. So it's a 100% fatal disease with no treatment or management. So once a deer has it, it's just a matter of time. It's not always, as they progress, they actually because and two, I'd like to I might mention that. So how do those prions get misfolded? And so another way that I've heard folks explain it is basically if you picture a slinky, when you get a slinky and it gets all out of whack, and you're not going to ever get that slinky back to how it was. Now, if you have it in a box of slinkies, it's probably going to get tangled up in all those others. And so basically, when one misfolded prion runs into a regular shaped prion, it will actually misfold it. And so that's how it slowly kind of spreads throughout the body, and then so that's why it kind of is such a slow progression to start really showing symptoms.
Mhm.
We kind of call it an incubation phase where the deer may have it, but there's no visible symptoms that you can detect on it, because maybe it just got it and there's just a few cells that have died, or it's not enough to make it noticeable yet. But yeah, over time it's just kind of a slow and steady kind of domino effect throughout the cells and it also really concentrates in their nervous system. It seems like those lymphatic system and nervous system, and so that kind of plays into how we sample for it later. But yeah, unfortunately, really the only management we have for it, and the reason we kind of are so heavy-handed in trying to stay ahead of it in the state, is that our only management is to trying to keep it from getting to Texas, or if it's here, catch it very early before many prions are generated and shed into the environment, for other deer to pick up on.
And
So
and so you had talked about the incubation period. So how long from like, and obviously it's really hard to, we've I think I think Colorado has done, I hate to say they're like at the forefront of it, but I think of all the states, they're kind of the one that's done or is known for doing a lot of the
mhm.
research on CWD. So what is the like estimated incubation period? So like day zero, deer
it
gets infected to, when could you roughly start to see potential
mhm.
signs?
That's a good question. It's a matter. I think they say sometimes can be like 1 to 4 years before you really be able to tell. So usually, typically, by the time it's expressing the symptoms, it's pretty much like it doesn't have much longer to live, that deer, but usually you'll see it in mature age classes, because they've been able to live long enough, to have it to get to that stage. So sometimes we'll get calls about fawns that look kind of poor, and they can that, oh, maybe it's CWD, but typically, like I said, it has to have lived long enough to be able to kind of progress. Now, in places where CWD is more prevalent, you know potentially fawns can be born with CWD if their mothers had the CWD when they were, gestating, and so they can be born with them. But that's you really when it gets to like really advanced stages of high prevalence rates within a geographic location. Um, but and you mentioned Colorado, so yeah, that's where we originally discovered CWD was, I believe, in a research pen in Colorado, and in the 1960s, I believe, and so but just the nature of this disease, like I said, it spreads fairly slowly deer to deer, and it just takes a long time to show itself. It just kind of slowly marched kind of across the country. I now to where I believe it's in at least 30 different states that we see it when you look at the map.
I think that's about right. A lot of the western states thus
Mhm.
far are
Mhm.
fairly, I hate to say safe. Has not been documented in a lot of the more western states up until
What?
now.
Yeah, well, so yeah, it's kind of like I said, it's kind of been spreading. It's a lot and so we should also mention, so it affects whitetail deer, but it affects all of our native cervids. So any of our native deer species in North America, you know, elk, mule deer, moose, whitetail, caribou, and then it also affects some other deer from across the other continents. So we know that red deer are a susceptible species. We know that sika deer are a susceptible species. I think even muntjac deer, which are in Asia, those little bitty
Oh
deer,
yeah.
and which it seems I guess they're just closely genetically related enough, or closely related enough, that they're also susceptible to it. There's some others that kind of the jury's still out on. They've been looking at trying to decide if axis deer may be
Yeah.
susceptible, because those kind of have some big management implications, especially in the hill country where there's a lot of axis deer running around in some areas. But so far we've never had a confirmed case in axis. But yeah, some of our other exotics, like I said, it's we're still learning a lot about it, even though it's been around since the 60s. There's still a lot to be learned from it, and unfortunately, starting to get areas where it's kind of the control group of like, okay, here's what it looks like in a population once it becomes widespread. Like I said, not necessarily in Texas as much, but in other states across the West and Midwest. But yeah, but when we look at, if I can pull up the map later of the positives, even in Canada, there's some, but they're kind of popping up a little bit of everywhere. So
So I guess oh, go ahead, Carly. Did you have a
I was just
question?
saying, interesting.
Um so I guess we're kind of sorry. This is one of those things where you just kind of jump forward. We'll take a step
mhm.
back. So we've talked
Yeah.
about obviously this is transmissible from deer to deer.
Mhm.
How thus far, what do we know in regards to the spread? How is it spread from one deer to the next?
Yeah, so it's originally we mostly thought it was like kind of direct contact, like nose to nose, two deer, kind of, or basically swapping saliva if they're licking at the same feeder, something like that, where it's more direct contact. Recent studies have showed that those prions can actually be shed into the environment as well. You know, which is hard to fathom, since it's not really a living thing. It's not like it's its own little creature that's existing out there, but it can be shed into the environment, and it apparently is like basically shelf stable, so it can persist in the environment for a certain amount of time. We don't necessarily know how long yet, but eventually, say a deer was eating, it can be shed on different plants the deer was feeding on. It can be shed at a feeder, underneath the feeder. um, um, and then over time, like later on, another deer can come by and accidentally consume that prion, and then start that same cycle within itself. So it really is kind of the perfect storm of a disease that's very hard to manage for once it's in an area. There um, but yeah, so and as well, it, like I said, it kind of, I always say, typically I always say that once it's in an area, it slowly spreads. It, like, basically you have like your infection point, and then it kind of slowly spreads deer to deer, through movement. And some of the other species spreads much faster, like in elk and mule deer. Not necessarily between deer, but just when you look at the geographic spread, because they're, a lot of migratory animals, are very large home ranges that are moving sometimes seasonally between different ranges, and really covering a lot of area where they may be shedding those prions. But for whitetail, it spreads fairly slowly deer to deer. Depends on how high that deer density is, how close together those deer are, and then like how concentrated they are around certain resources. But really, a lot of the management that we're trying to get done or we're able to work on in the state is that we're trying to keep it from getting its largest leaps and bounds across the state from our interaction with CWD, knowingly or, mostly unknowingly, but through different management tactics like trying to not, be careful about our movement of live deer, trying to do testing beforehand to know if a deer does have CWD before that some deer is transmitted or relocated live. And then also, even once the deer is dead, we're still trying to be conscious of, okay, how are we treating this animal? Where are we moving it to when it becomes a carcass, as a hunter harvested deer? What are we doing with those carcass parts? And are we responsibly, disposing of them, or are we accidentally, equipping this disease to spread to new areas that this deer would have never made it to or traveled to? So.
Yeah. So and so you had touched on obviously deer season's coming up, people are going to start harvesting deer.
Mhm.
Can you talk about sort of what, because I know some things have changed a little bit every year with CWD, we learn new things change a little bit. Can you sort of give us the rundown of what CWD, I'll say, if you're a hunter, what is CWD management going to look like in regards to potential movement of carcasses, getting animals sampled, what that's
Mhm.
going to kind of look like? And I realize that, you're up, your area is a little bit different from other
Mhm.
areas, but can you just kind of give us a little bit of a rundown?
Of course. Yeah. So really, so last year there's a regulation put in place that we've been trying to spread the news on to hunters. I think a lot of folks haven't quite grasped the implications to themselves on it. It's called carcass disposal requirements. And so any hunter across the state that's harvesting a deer um, is kind of held to this. And so essentially, as before, say I shoot a deer at the lease, a couple counties over, I bring it home, I process it and process it myself, and maybe I have these carcass parts that I need to get rid of. And so maybe in the past, it'd be legal for me to just toss them out in the backyard or wherever, let the varmints and the vultures take care of them and not worry about it. Because now we're trying to really focus on potentially limiting the spread of CWD through that avenue, but as well as other diseases that are out there. We've been implemented what's called carcass disposal requirements. And it can be kind of burdensome to try and explain just through conversation, because it's kind of like if you can imagine, it's like a flow chart of
Mhm.
because there's so
Yeah,
many different things that people may be doing with their deer, and
right.
then it takes you down a different avenue of like what needs to happen.
Hmm.
So the most common, and I would say, like I mentioned, when I first heard it as a hunter, I was like, whoa, this may really change how things are done. But then when I kind of started thinking of the most common ways that deer are handled after they're harvested, it really seems like most folks are already doing that. So for myself, when I think of myself as a hunter, when I'm hunting on our family land, I'll go out and I'll shoot a deer. We'll take it up to the house, which is, on that same property. We gut it, we skin it, we process it at home. So eventually we'll have the bones to throw out. So that hide, that head, those bones, and the guts, we go and we take them in there. They never left the property where the deer was harvested. Those can just be disposed of in the gut pile, just like normal. No difference whatsoever, because it can be discarded on the surface, not need to be buried, because it's already, that deer originated from that property. So even if it had CWD, it's already present on that property. And so now, say it's the same scenario, you shoot a deer, but now I take it to the processor and have them take care of the processing. They'll say maybe, some folks will take the whole deer, not guts and all, to the processor. The processor would gut it, skin it, debone it, do all that, and then they're handling the proper disposal part of that. So essentially, the three options are that either when you shoot a deer, if it's on the property of origin where it was hunted, you can leave all the unused carcass parts on that property of origin. If you take it to a different property, you have the two choices are either to bury it at least 3 feet deep in a pit, or to make sure it gets into a proper, a trash service that will get it to a landfill. And so um, and so some folks are thinking, well, I don't want to stink up my trash can, but you really what we've done it's like check stations is if you have bones or if you're freezing it beforehand, you're trying to plan it for when, okay, can I clean this deer and then get it in the trash, the bones or hide or whatever, right before trash day, pretty much the night before, or leave those bones in the freezer until you're ready to put it out in the trash and take it to the curb. Um, because really in the hill country, we know that sometimes it can be pretty hard to dig a hole 3 feet deep, or quite a chore. So say even another scenario would be I shoot a deer on a different property. I come back to my house to gut it and skin it, or clean it or quarter it, whatever it be, and have those extra parts. I could, if it's feasible, I could go back to that property where I harvest it and then throw the parts out there. It's just that, we don't, like we said, we don't want to be leaving deer parts somewhere that they didn't originate from to have the potential to spread that disease. Um, and so I got kind of down that rabbit hole there. But like I said, it's a lot of scenarios, usually, especially if you have any questions about it, you can always call either your county biologist, like me and my colleagues, or you can call your game wardens, because they're going to be the ones that are able to kind of help you walk you through that scenario to say, okay, you're in the right in the eyes of the law, or you're not, and here's how you can fix that. And that's always a good thing, I think, as we're looking forward to the hunting season, to try and make sure you're aware of that, but then also think about, okay, what am I going to do to make sure I'm within compliance there? But yeah.
So I know a couple of years back that we had, even you said that you were a CWD technician, so you were sampling deer. Is TPWD still taking CW, or are there check stations? Are there certain areas that you are, I don't think they technically require you, but is highly, what's the word I'm looking for?
Encourage.
Encouraged. Yes, there we
Yeah,
go.
yeah.
Highly encouraged to take your deer for sampling.
Yeah, of course. So it used to be when we would have a positive detection, we would set up a CWD zone where they had mandatory testing within a geographic area. And so if you harvested a deer in that area, had to bring it to the check station and get it sampled. They've been working towards trying to take a little bit of that burden off of the hunter to try and not discourage, hunting and recreation. And so they've moved to mostly, I believe, voluntary sampling in those zones. Over the past few years, they've been trying to shrink those geographic areas down. If it's a captive CWD detection, that being that it's a breeding facility, high fence breeding facility, usually within a high fence ranch, where we have some level of confidence that it should be contained for the most part. We always try and exercise caution, but so yeah, so now they're kind of moving away from that. Of course, if you're close to, and we can pull up in a little bit our website that kind of shows you where the detections have been, and then also where we have existing sampling, check stations. So typically this year, mostly it's going to be voluntary. At any point, if you, so a big part of my role and a big part of all of my colleagues' roles in the fall is CWD surveillance. So we have goals set across our different deer management units across the state to try and get, this amount of samples to reach our goal. So we can have some degree of confidence that, we're out looking for it and we are not detecting it. That's what, because a lot of times landowners will say, well, is there any in Blanco County? And then I say, no, we've never detected it. And then they're like, well, why are you sampling? And it's like, well, because that's how I can tell you that we've never detected it. It's so I spend, and we get those samples a number of ways. Mostly we'll, like I said, you can always bring a deer by a voluntary check station if you're in that area, if you're in the area with one. I was looking on our website, and they've also put in a lot of the wildlife management areas. You can bring a deer by or a sample by, and they can sample it there. A lot of those are by appointment, so they'll have you call a phone number to make sure someone's there to be able to sample that deer for you, as well as some of our district offices are able to are set up as potentially a voluntary check station if someone, like I said, if the personnel is there to be able to sample it. This year they even I guess I will share my screen here to show y'all if that's all right.
Oh
Pull
yeah,
up
no,
the
go
website.
for it. And
Um,
we'll say, and so y'all also sample roadkills as well.
yes,
So if
yes,
y'all
another.
ever see a deer that's spray painted like bright orange or like pink or anything like that, that's what that is a
It
biologist
may have
came,
been me. Yeah.
sampled that, and they're like, okay, we've done this one already. Um,
Yes.
it's
Yeah,
one of
that's
those
a.
things during sampling season. It's like, oh, I see a dead deer. I'll text our biologist, be like, hey, did you know that
Mhm,
there's a deer on, FM
mhm.
whatever? And he's like, oh yeah, no, I didn't know that. I was like, I wasn't there yesterday, so it must be pretty fresh. So
Yeah, yeah. We definitely, yeah, one of the things we get to look forward to, we sample roadkills throughout the year if we can get to them fresh, but in the summertime, it's sometimes it's like unless you watch to get hit, there's really it,
uh-huh.
it
Yeah.
turns very quick. It turns very quickly, but in the fall, especially once the rutting activity picks up and they're being a little more careless than they usually are. We have quite a high volume of roadkills that we'll try and get out and sample. Um, and so yeah, so some of your biologists will if they don't see a lot of roadkills, they may have folks that reach out to them if they see them. Sometimes I think with me in my position, it's in my counties, there's so many roadkills that I think if everyone did that, I would never be able to get anywhere other than on the side of the road. So what I usually do is if I know um, someone in a certain area where I don't have a lot of samples, because we'll try and spread them across the county, try and fill in the holes in our map. Um, I may say, oh, I know you drive this road every day. Like if you see a fresh one, can you let me know about it? So I kind of manage, what kind of volume I'm getting of reports. But yeah, but when I was a student at A&M, I would let our biologists know when they would see a deer out on the county road that had just been hit as well. So it's kind of a fun way to get to engage with the public.
Yeah, one
And
of those things you get into this field and you're like, well, I didn't realize that this was going to be part of my job is
Yes.
looking for roadkill
yeah.
and you need to do a roadside
Mhm.
roadside sampling. So,
Yeah, no, it's definitely and it's definitely a skill that I don't think is going anywhere. I think I'm blessed.
unfortunately,
Yeah, I think fortunately I'm blessed with the not the strongest nose, I guess, or a good stomach. So I don't have too much problem with the road kills, but yeah, you can get some pretty rank ones.
oh yes. Oh yes.
As I'm sure everybody knows as they're driving down the highway and smell
Uh-huh.
a bad a stinky deer. But um, so when we come to the web page, they've really kind of added a lot more info on our CWD dashboard that's on our Texas Parks and Wildlife, tpwd.texas.gov website. And so I'll come down here, um, and right now it's listed under hot topics. You can click on it there. Or you can search CWD from the search bar. Are y'all able to see my cursor?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, just checking, just checking if I'm giving you directions with my mouse and you're like, I don't know what he's talking about. But so yeah, so here's the info page on chronic wasting disease. Has all sorts of different info. I was looking through it again, because like you mentioned, a lot of times there is a lot of as we're trying to figure out the best practices and management implications, there is a lot of change of regulation as we're trying to adapt with it, trying to find that right fit of what can we do and to make sure we're taking care of the deer, the deer herds in the state. So this is one of your best ways to kind of keep an eye on it. And of course, there's background info of different stuff. There's info to look at specific cases. What do I need to do if I find a deer, or think of a deer with CWD, different regs, how to identify and report if you see one that seems kind of clinical symptoms of CWD. Um, this year as well, they actually just started this. You can, if you're a landowner and you're okay with pulling samples, you can actually request CWD sampling kits to be sent to you free of charge. And
Oh,
I think it comes with everything you need to sample. I think it comes with the instructions as well. I haven't had one of these in hand, but it comes with basically everything you need to know to sample that deer and to pull it. When we sample deer, we remove their lymph nodes. So you have lymph nodes across your body. We do as well, but in deer, we'll pull it's called the retropharyngeal lymph nodes. And so that's just a big word to describe where it is in the body. But essentially, we're pulling the two lymph nodes kind of along on either side of the esophagus. And one, because it's easy to get to, and most hunters have no problem with us getting it. It's not like we're trying to sample their back straps or anything. So it's something that, yeah, folks are pretty generous and giving up for most of the time. And then the only thing with the lymph nodes is that the only thing you would want to keep in mind is if it's a deer, if it's a buck that you're wanting to get shoulder mounted, if you're trying to save the cape, because your taxidermist isn't going to appreciate if you cut through the cape and they have a lot of stitching to do.
As a taxidermist, as a recreational taxidermist, I can very much attest to that. Please don't do it. We can fix it, but we can't make the hair magically grow back. So please just don't.
Exactly. And also, with that being said, though, you can, once that deer is caped out,
yes,
once you have the cape off, you can easily get to the lymph nodes. It's just making sure you take the right steps. What we would do at the check stations, if a deer came in that they wanted shoulder mounted, but we had to get a sample from it before they left, we would do the wide cut on the back of the head, back of the skull. And we'd actually take the obex. So that's basically the brain stem, where that spinal cord is meeting, where it splits and meets the two different right and left lobe of the brain. And so we would, it's kind of, I don't know if this is too much info, but yeah, it's like a very delicate process of trying to fish that out of the little hole on the back of the skull. And we actually have found that it's pretty handy to use grapefruit knives.
Yeah.
So yes, that's what we typically use. So we it used to be that we would always take the obex because I think it's one of the, because it's a nervous system, it's something that affects the nervous system, you can detect it there. And then, but it's a little bit longer process to get that obex out of the deer.
Yes.
And then, and also that obex isn't as shelf stable. So if the deer's been dead longer, it starts to break down faster than those lymph nodes. And so yeah, so we typically just try and get the lymph nodes because it's the easiest and we can detect it pretty confidently from the lymph nodes. But yeah, so there's this kit you can order. You could always call your local biologist. And if I'm available, like say if someone's in Blanco County and I'm available, I'd try and get that sample or try and meet up. Usually if it's like, it's nice if we could do like batches of deer, like if you're going to be shooting a handful out on the lease this weekend and you don't mind me stopping by, that's a good way to get a few samples from one area. And then, usually unless, we're always taking as many samples as we can get, but unless it's, we have some reason to suspect that it may be on a property, we don't necessarily need to sample every single deer. We kind of give preference to bucks, just because I guess just the ecology of them. They spend a lot of time, with scrapes and a lot of time at feeders. They tend to have a little higher prevalence of it, and especially mature bucks. They've lived longer and have chased more does and scraped more scrapes and all that. So we try and lean towards that. But another way that you may have run into us before is that we're fortunate that across the state, at least, it's specifically in the hill country, we're fortunate to be able to work with a few really good local processors that allow us to set up shop on opening weekend or those like Thanksgiving weekend, to where we can kind of camp out at where the hunters are bringing in deer and just be there and talk with them and, let them know about CWD and ask if they don't mind us taking a voluntary sample. And so you may see us on different processors across the state. I even, when I was at A&M, I was fortunate to get to help our local biologist go to a processor as a student and go practice taking samples and listening to him engage with the public. And it really, it's fun to get to, even though I'm not out in the blind on opening day, it's fun to get to be out there and kind of hear how things are going and see how people did and get to hear the hunting stories and all that. But if you are interested in those voluntary check stations on this webpage, here's a map of them. And like I said, since each one is a little bit different scenario of like what to do, I would really recommend going to this and clicking on them. And so you can and it will have all the info on it. So see, like, we have one in Kerrville. This is our district office. So this is so it's a it's a physical location of it's a game warden and where my district leader office is out of. But you can it's open Monday to Friday. It's closed on state holidays. But yeah, you should be able to call this number and come in and potentially have someone around. Where we had existing check stations on where there used to be zones like in Segovia and Kimball County. That still exists there, and so they usually have a little bit more. If we have the staffing for it, well, we should have more flexibility to get folks there. And there's also on some of these there's also drop boxes. So if it's a doe or a spike, or if it's a buck that you've already skull capped, so you don't care about the rest of the head, you can drop them off at a we have a freezer there or a refrigerator, and we have all the info you need to tag. You put a tag on it, so we have the info we need. Put it in a bag, and then stick it in that refrigerator, and someone will be by later to sample it. And then we'll and what the card you take from there works as your proof of sex, since you're leaving the head behind. Is if you're transporting it, a deer, you need proof of sex. So yeah, we have a card that you take with you to keep you okay in the eyes of the law. So that's, like I said, there's lots of different ways. At the end of the day, especially, like I said, don't be afraid to reach out to your county biologist if you'd like to. And we can be found when you go online. If you just look up, TPWD biologist Blanco County, it's going to pop up. It's the same way as you could find a game warden like that as well, or you can navigate through our website. But yeah, so I guess while I'm on here, but I guess any other questions on that, or if I beat the dead horse?
I think that was a great little rundown. Carly, do you have any questions on that?
I don't think so. I did find that website really easily, so I went ahead and commented the link on our Facebook. So if you're watching, that link is there. And while I was listening, I kind of played around on it a little bit. It's got a lot of good information on there.
Yeah. They definitely are. They're trying to make it kind of your one-stop shop, for all the publicly accessible info in Texas, should be on here. So here, this is a dashboard of different info. You can see kind of our year-to-date sampling efforts. And so this is a map of our deer management units. So this is just how we kind of delineate how we monitor the deer herds. And it's a larger than county. Basically, we use roads as boundaries, and we're looking at similar soils and habitat types to say, okay, this is kind of the same deer herd here. So in my role, I'm mostly in this DMU 7 North. And so I think our goal is 300 samples. And so we're already at 74 samples. And those are from, of course, no hunter harvested deer yet.
There shouldn't be any hunter harvested samples.
What's the date on that?
But so those are mostly from roadkills. And then as well, we also have another way we sample is through clinical deer. So say you noticed a deer died that seems like it has symptoms of something, and you call us and we're able to come out. Usually we'll be able to kind of look it over. It depends on each scenario and if we're able to get out there. But typically, even if we don't necessarily suspect it's CWD, we'll still take that sample, just in case, to send it off and to fill in another, hole in the map. But sometimes too, we'll be able to do a necropsy to try and figure out what's going on. Now, we don't get out to every deer that dies across the whole state, but especially we want landowners to know, especially if it gets into like multiples where you're noticing, larger die-offs like 5 to 10 and up. That's something where, we should let a biologist know and try and kind of get to the bottom of it, see what's going on. So you can see, we've got some work to do across the state, but of course, it's most of our samples come during, like I said, during that when hunters are hunting and when roadkills are being roadkilled. And so that's mostly in the fall and winter. And so just about to start up. But yeah, and so then here's, so this map shows everywhere, all these green squares are everywhere that's ever had a CWD sample submitted, and then also where there's positives, just in the rough location of where positives have been detected. And so, closest to us, in the hill country, like I said, in the western hill country, there's been a few more cases. Typically, they're what we consider captive CWD, like I mentioned earlier. So it's within a deer breeding facility, a high fence deer breeding facility within a high fence property. And so, we of course take those just as seriously as any others, and try to make sure that we're managing those properly. But as far as free ranging deer go in the state, we have the first place it was detected was in the Waco Mountains in West Texas, from a mule deer in 2012, I believe. And which was not a big surprise, because New Mexico had detected some just on the other side of the state boundary, so it's, likely the same herd. And there's also some free ranging population of mule deer and elk up in the Panhandle that have been tested positive. And then other than that, there's a few places. The first captive CWD zone we detected was in Medina County, this Medina County zone, Medina and a little bit in Bandera, kind of that Tarpley area. So like south central hill country. And so that was originally a captive and CWD population, but now we have detected some free ranging positives as well. So on those, we try and monitor, we try and make sure that we're sampling and understanding the prevalence to see how it spreads, but also trying to, we're looking at, okay, how is this, trying to take population estimates to see how it changes those dynamics over time, and trying to make, it's an unfortunate thing to happen, but like, let's try and learn from this and see what it looks like over time. So in most recently, there was actually a positive in the Hollywood Park area in San Antonio. So that one is one that they're trying to monitor. It makes it definitely changes our sampling strategies, where it's an area with very, very little hunting. So most of those come from folks calling in, clinical or sick deer or road kills, and we really rely on the public to help with that, with so many roads there and so many streets. And we rely on folks there helping report those road kills or the sick deer, so we can send a technician or a biologist to go get that sample.
All right. Well, I think that is some great information. So yes, so if y'all see a roadkill deer, become best friends with your biologist, your county biologist. And like Cody said, I mean, I think literally if you Google like TPWD, or it's like find your biologist, I think is what it's called. You'll be able to find it real quick. Find your county, then find your biologist. But
Yeah.
what are we going to share?
Oh, I was showing you. I just pulled up So I have a PowerPoint that my colleague gave me, but there's a slide on here that shows basically the continent wide, positives.
Oh, okay.
Now I don't know why it doesn't want to go to present mode, but we can certainly look at it just from the slide. So as you can see, so those dots, those gray counties are where there's free ranging populations detected. So like we have Bexar County highlighted there. We actually have Valverde County, Del Rio. There was some free ranging deer, but we think knock on wood, we think we caught that one very early, and we're able to have a couple positives, and we were hoping that we potentially kind of got ahead of that one. Now we still monitor in those areas, and also there's in Coleman County, there was actually a free ranging detected from just a voluntary sample from a hunter harvested deer at a processor. So that one was kind of a surprise to us. We sample, but we like we said, most of the deer across the state, like 99% of deer across the state don't have it. And so I think a lot of times with the public, it's like, well, why are we making so much effort for this thing that is like very few cases that we've actually detected? But like I said, just from the management of it, all we really can do is try and stay ahead of it.
Right.
And so then this one is another one it shows, and I'm not sure why my map isn't showing up. Oh, there it is. So yeah, so you can see in Texas, I think to the numbers this summer, we've had 140 cases in free ranging deer. We've had 77 cases from breeder release sites, 915 positive cases from breeder pens. which seems like a very high number, but when you think that in a small pen, once one deer has it, and by the time you detect it, it's very likely that most of those deer are going to end up with it, unfortunately. And so and then one research pin. So it ends up being right now detected in different capacities in 34 counties of our 254, and only 1,133 total positives that we've detected. But yeah, like I said, always working on trying to stay ahead of it in the long run. So. But yeah, I think I probably have gone way over my time.
Hey, that's okay. CWD is one of those things that it's a complex topic. It
Yeah,
truly
and
is.
I think a lot of people are curious about it, so hopefully we get some viewers on this that get some good info out of it because I think that was really good. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
of
but
course. And
yeah, we'll wrap things up. But again, Cody, thank you for joining us this afternoon. Again, if you have any questions, visit TPWD's website. If you can't find your answer there, talk to your county biologist. They'll be able to help you out as well. But I guess, Carly, we have anything else?
I don't think so. That was all good.
Yes, so we will not see y'all next week. Carly and I will be at some yearly trainings that we have to do. I think Carly's going to try and post a video, try to find the video. Um, but otherwise, we'll see y'all not next week, but the following week, which will be, shoot, that means September's almost going to be over at that point. Oh, that kind of hurts. But one day closer to
Fine.
deer season. So I'm not
yeah,
complaining for that one
Yes.
bit. Um, but yeah, so we'll see y'all in a couple of weeks. So thanks everybody.
Thank you.
thanks.